Well, as I mentioned earlier today, President Biden gave the commencement address at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. The point in this speech, he pointed to his administration's focus on wokeness as the source of international admiration. Then what appeared to be a prophetic act, he fell down on the stage. Now, in the debt ceiling deal, the military is funded just as the Biden administration requested, including about $150 million for diversity and inclusion programs. Well, join me now to talk about this and where we go from here is Congressman Mark Alford. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee, the House Agriculture Committee, and the House Committee on Small Business. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Missouri. Congressman Alford, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Tony. Just flew in from D.C. We're in our office in Raymore, Missouri.
Well, I think I'm glad you got there in time to join us. You joined 70 of your Republican colleagues in the House voting against the spending bill last night. Tell us why.
Look, number one, I promised when I ran for this office, started running almost 2 years ago, that I would listen to the will of the people, that this is not going to be about Mark Alford. This is going to be about what they want. And it was very clear that even though we paid the Limit, Save, Grow Act, which did raise the debt ceiling $1.5 trillion, it was going to save a lot of money for the taxpayers. We were going to claw back some big things. We were going to get rid of the 87,000 IRS agents sent to harass everyday American people. Those things did not happen. We went from a 1-year deal to a 2-year deal, and it raised the debt ceiling another $4 trillion. 13% higher than what we're at now, which is ridiculous. We surveyed 50,000 of our constituents. We had numerous phone calls coming into all 3 of our congressional offices. I listened to them. I made the tough choice to vote no on this for the future of America.
Well, you mentioned that we're going to be up against a break here. We're going to come back on the other side of the break. I'm thankful you can stick with us. But you mentioned $4 trillion added, but that's best case scenario because there's actually no cap on this. It's just a time frame. It could go higher than $4 trillion.
It's a moving target. I am sick of moving targets. I am sick of Washington waiting to the last minute and having people who are responsible for voting for 750,000 people, making them vote on something out of fear. I'm not living in fear. I'm not voting in fear. I'm voting for the people of the 4th Congressional District. It was a no vote. It will stay a no vote.
So is our nation's military stronger today?
No. We have great people in the military. We need more great people in the military. We are not reaching our recruitment goals. The Marine Corps was the only branch of our military to do that last year. We have a young population, only 9% has any interest in joining the military because the progressive woke liberal side of our country has so demonized America, has so demonized our founding fathers, our flag, for what we stand for, that we are not a nation under the protection and providence of God, that we're just human beings who evolved. And so there's no precious consideration for America anymore. There's no patriotism in a lot of families. We have families now who are veterans who are now telling their children and grandchildren, don't worry about serving in the military because it's not what it used to be. Yeah. Somehow, Tony, we've got to recapture that. We have to instill pride back in our country.
Yeah.
We have to take back the minds and the hearts and the souls of our young people. We also have to rebuild our military. China is outpacing us at every turn. If you look at comparisons from 1999 and the weapons that they had in missiles, tanks, ships, and in space, it's pretty much equivalent to where we were then. By 2025, they are outpacing us at a multiple of at least 10. We do not have the money being invested now should we have to repel them or deter them if they were to invade Taiwan. And the budget that the president came out with this year, we laughed at that because that was not nearly enough to build our military in what we should be. And yet that's the number pretty much that was decided in this deal that was cut and that we voted on and the House passed and is now before the Senate. A 1% raise in spending in year 2025. And when you figure into inflation, it's actually a cut. of probably up to 5%. A 5% cut in our military. We can do better than that.
So, Congressman, let's talk about that, because you serve on the House Armed Services Committee, and there's another bite at the apple, so to speak, with the National Defense Authorization Act that really kind of dictates the policy and how money is going to be spent in the military. There's a lot of this money, somewhere between $100 million, $150 million. I know that's pocket change to some when we're talking about trillions, but that's going to the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I mean, we could just reroute a lot of this money to stuff that is detracting from the military's mission and put it back into its core mission. Could we not?
We certainly could, Tony. You remember when we were growing up and the news stories about the $1,000 hammers that the Department of Defense was spending,
Right,
and
the
how
gold
that was
toilet
exposed.
seats.
Yeah, the toilet seats. We are wasting money on these programs. Our strength as a nation is in our commonality. It is not in our diversity. I told that to Secretary of Defense Austin. I told that to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs when they testified before that, and they couldn't really disagree with that. When you go across the Potomac there and you walk amongst the white gravestones of the brave men and women who gave everything to fight for our nation, to die for our nation, and you look down, you can't tell the color of their skin and you can't tell what pronoun they use, because the enemy doesn't care. And we shouldn't either. We are a nation built on our unity. And it's what we have in common that we should be celebrating.
You know, it's interesting, Congressman, you bring that up, because if you look at what's divided our nation, it's the identity politics. That's what's divided our nation. And now they're seeking to replicate that in our nation's military, where if there's one place we need cohesion, it's in our military. As a veteran working in a small group, a squad in the Marine Corps, you have to work together. They're dividing us with this identity politics, and they're forcing it on the very individuals, as you said, that are predisposed to go into the military but won't, because they're now perceiving it to be hostile to their values.
Tony, there's a reason they call it a uniform. You wore one proudly. I never did. I'm doing what I can now to help save America. But that uniform is a symbol of pride, but it's also a symbol that it's not about the individual in that uniform. It is the pride that they have in wearing the colors on the arm, and the pride they have in their heart serving their nation. Until we get back to where we are truly uniform, we are not going to be the fighting nation that we need to be to deter China, and possibly, God forbid, if we go to war with them, to have to beat them. We've got to wake up.
Final question for you, Congressman Alford. You've mentioned China, and I want to ask you straight on. And obviously, I know you cannot share any information that is not publicly out there, any classified information. But how concerned are you when it comes to China and the growing threat there?
Tony, I'm very concerned. This is new to me. I ran for office. I got elected in Congress. I go in after orientation, after I'm sworn in. I get top secret SCI clearance. I go into these skiffs, and my jaw, I'm trying to keep it from dropping as I'm hearing actually what's going on. And I don't want to overblow my importance in all this, but God put me here for a reason. And I think part of it's to be almost like a John the Baptist, to try to warn people, to try to tell people what's coming. We have the China Select Committee. We have other committees that are delving into the very specifics of the threat from China. They are in everything we do here in America. Our cheap computers, our Wi-Fi systems, our drones, the naval ports that we have, shipyards. They're in the cranes in most of the shipyards. They have their cameras, they have their ears, they have balloons flying over unimpeded that flew almost directly over this office in Raymore and over Whiteman Air Force Base, home of the B-2 bomber, which we represent. We've got to wake up. We've got to get real. We've got to start making things back in America again. We've got to instill the pride that we once had, because if we are not ready, we could be doomed.
Well, thanks for sounding the alarm. It needs to be rung loudly. Congressman, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.